The abyssal plain stretched endlessly before Dr. Sarah Chen's submersible viewport, an alien landscape more foreign than any astronaut's view of distant planets. 3 miles beneath the Pacific, darkness wrapped around her vessel like a living thing, broken only by the cold blue glow of her external lights. She guided the craft with practiced precision, letting its sensors map the contours of a newly discovered hydrothermal vent. Oxygen levels holding steady, she reported into her comlink, beginning final approach to Site Theta. Static crackled through her headset before Dr. Martinez's voice responded from the research vessel above. "Copy that, Sarah. Remember, you've got 40 minutes before we need to start the ascent sequence." Sarah smiled, though no one could see it. After 6 months of searching, they'd finally found what might be an entirely new ecosystem. The vent's chemical signature was unlike anything they'd encountered before. Her heart quickened as the submersible's lights illuminated a forest of tube worms swaying in the currents, their red plumes filtering nutrients from the mineral-rich water. The sight before her changed everything. She thought she knew about deep-sea biology. The tube worms were easily twice the size of any recorded specimen, and their organization seemed almost architectural. They formed concentric circles around something that gleamed dully in her lights. "Martinez, are you seeing this?" Sarah adjusted her camera feeds, making sure the surface team got a clear view. "The settlement pattern here, it's not random. These organisms are responding to something." She maneuvered closer, careful not to disturb the delicate ecosystem. The object at the center of the worm colony became clearer, a smooth oval structure about the size of a car, its surface covered in patterns that couldn't possibly be natural erosion. "Sarah," Martinez's voice carried an edge of concern. "We're picking up some unusual energy readings from your location. Maybe we should." The rest of his warning dissolved into static as the object pulsed with a deep blue light. Sarah's instruments went haywire, screens flickering with cascading numbers before going dark. Only her external lights remained functional, illuminating a scene that sent ice through her veins. The tube worms were retreating into their tubes, all at once, as if fleeing from danger. The water around her submersible began to vibrate at a frequency she could feel in her bones. The oval structure's patterns were shifting, lines of light tracing ancient geometries across its surface. "Martinez, surface team." Sarah tried every communication channel, but only silence answered. She reached for the emergency ascent controls, but before she could activate them, something massive moved in the darkness beyond her lights. At first, she thought it was a whale. The shape was certainly big enough, but as it moved into the edge of her illumination, she realized no Earth creature moved like that. Its body seemed to phase between solid and liquid, covered in biomechanical plates that rippled like muscle. Multiple appendages, too precise to be tentacles, too fluid to be machines, reached toward her submersible. Sarah's training kicked in. She cut her external lights, plunging everything into darkness except for the alien object's pulsing glow. In the pitch black, she could see more shapes moving in the distance, drawn to the artifact's call like moths to a flame. Her fingers flew across the backup controls, activating the submersible's secondary systems. The vessel's batteries wouldn't last long, but she needed to move, needed to think. The artifact's activation had drawn something to Earth's oceans, and she had a sickening feeling that this was just the beginning. As she guided her craft away from the scene, using the barest minimum of power, Sarah's mind raced. The pattern she'd seen, the impossible precision of the tube worm colony, it hadn't been random. The creatures of the deep had been guarding something, perhaps for longer than humans had existed. And now she had woken it up. A low vibration shuddered through her hull, different from before. She recognized this one. It was the sound of something big moving through water at high speed. The hunters had noticed her escape attempt. Sarah cut power completely, letting her submersible drift in the current. Above her, miles of ocean separated her from the surface, from help, from anything familiar. Below, ancient secrets stirred in the darkness, and all around her, Things that had no business existing in Earth's oceans were closing in. She took a deep breath, forcing her racing heart to slow. She was a scientist, trained to observe, to understand, to adapt. If she was going to survive this, she needed to think like one. The aliens hunting her might have advanced technology, but they were in her world now. The deep ocean was the most hostile environment on Earth, and she knew its rules better than they did. A plan began to form in her mind as she watched the aliens' bioluminescent forms circle her position. They were sophisticated hunters, but they were used to being the apex predators. They hadn't counted on finding someone who understood the true nature of survival in the abyss. Sarah reached for her tablet, bringing up everything she knew about deep-sea pressure gradients and thermoclines. If she couldn't fight them directly, she would make the ocean itself her ally. After all, humanity hadn't conquered Earth's oceans. They had learned to respect them. Perhaps it was time to teach these visitors the same lesson. "All right," she whispered to herself, fingers hovering over her controls. "Let's see how well you adapt to planet Earth." In complete darkness, Sarah felt more than saw the alien hunters circling her submersible. Their biomechanical bodies disrupted the natural flow of water, creating microcurrents her instruments could detect even on backup power. She forced herself to remain still, counting the seconds between each pass. "Think," she muttered, reviewing everything she knew about deep-sea survival. The aliens' movements suggested they used some form of biosonar, like dolphins or whales. But unlike Earth's cetaceans, they seemed to struggle with the extreme pressure at this depth. Their formations wobbled slightly when passing through pressure gradients, a weakness she could exploit. A sudden impact rocked her submersible. One of the hunters had brushed against her hull, testing its strength. The reinforced titanium held, but the message was clear. They were done waiting. Sarah activated her emergency beacon, not because she expected rescue. No one could reach her in time, but because she needed to understand how the hunters would react to different frequencies. The aliens' response was immediate and revealing. They recoiled from the beacon's pulse, their bioluminescent patterns flickering in what seemed like discomfort. "Interesting," Sarah murmured, making mental notes. "You don't like competing signals, do you?" She reached for her research equipment, specifically the array of acoustic sensors she'd been using to study whale communication. With trembling fingers, she reconfigured them to emit a broader spectrum of frequencies. It wasn't a weapon, but it might buy her time. The hunters were closing in again, their movements more aggressive. Sarah waited until they were almost upon her, then activated the acoustic array at full power. The effect was spectacular. The aliens' biomechanical forms convulsed, their careful formation shattering as they tumbled through the water. But Sarah knew she had only moments before they adapted. She fired her thrusters, driving her submersible deeper into the abyss. The pressure gauge climbed steadily. 4,000 meters, 4,500 meters. Her vessel groaned under the increasing strain. Behind her, the hunters recovered quickly, exactly as she'd feared. Their pursuit was relentless, but now she could see patterns in their behavior. They moved like pack hunters, similar to wolves, coordinating their movements to herd their prey. But they were hunting in an environment that had taken Earth's predators millions of years to master. Sarah steered toward a field of hydrothermal vents she'd mapped earlier that week. The scalding water erupting from these underwater geysers created temperature differentials that played havoc with sonar. More importantly, they attracted swarms of local marine life. As she approached the vents, something extraordinary happened. The deep-sea creatures, instead of scattering from her submersible as usual, began to gather around it. Schools of bioluminescent fish, swarms of shrimp, even a group of giant squid, all clustering near her vessel, as if drawn to it. Then Sarah understood. The artifact hadn't just awakened. It had changed something fundamental about the relationship between her and the ocean's inhabitants. They recognized her as an ally against the alien threat. The hunters plunged into the hydrothermal field after her, but now they faced more than just one human in a submersible. Thousands of deep-sea creatures moved in concert, their bodies creating shifting curtains of living light that confused the alien senses. Giant squid wrapped their tentacles around the hunters, not to kill but to disorient. Schools of fish moved in synchronized patterns that scattered the aliens' biosonar. Sarah watched in awe as the ocean itself seemed to rise against the invaders. But she knew this advantage wouldn't last forever. The hunters were already beginning to adapt, their biomechanical bodies shifting to cope with the attacks. She needed to understand more about them, about the artifact, about why they had come. As if in response to her thoughts, one of the alien hunters broke from its pack, approaching her submersible differently than before. Its movements were less predatory, more deliberate. The creature's bioluminescent patterns shifted into complex geometries, similar to those she'd seen on the artifact. "You're trying to communicate," Sarah realized. She adjusted her acoustic sensors to record and analyze the patterns. The hunter's lights pulsed in response, growing more complex. Through her viewport, Sarah could now see the alien's true form more clearly. Its biomechanical body wasn't a weapon or a suit. It was an adaptation, a desperate attempt to survive in an environment it wasn't built for. These weren't just hunters. They were explorers, like her, changed by their journey in ways they hadn't expected. But before she could process this revelation, her submersible sensors screamed a warning. More signals were appearing above them. Dozens, then hundreds. The first wave had just been scouts. The real invasion was beginning. Sarah looked at the alien hunters still attempting to communicate, then at the swarms of sea life gathered around her submersible. She had found a way to survive the first encounter, but now she faced an entire army. Her only advantages were her knowledge of the ocean and her newfound connection to its creatures. She would need both if she hoped to prevent what was coming. The hunter's lights pulsed once more, forming a pattern she now recognized as a question. Sarah took a deep breath and began adjusting her acoustic array. If she couldn't fight them all, maybe she could help them understand what they were really facing, not just her, but an entire world that had perfected the art of survival long before humans or aliens had ever dreamed of the stars. The ocean trembled with the arrival of the alien armada. Through her viewport, Sarah watched as hundreds of biomechanical forms descended from above, their bodies adapting and transforming to handle the crushing depths. But something was different about these newcomers. Their movements were more desperate, less coordinated than the first wave of hunters. Using her reconfigured acoustic array, Sarah had established a rudimentary form of communication with the first hunter. Through patterns of light and sound, she began to understand their story. They called themselves the Adaptari, a dying civilization that had spent millennia searching the galaxy's oceans for something they'd lost. The very artifact Sarah had discovered. "You're not just hunting," Sarah transmitted through carefully modulated sound waves. "You're dying." The hunter's response came in pulses of bioluminescence that her instruments translated into emotional concepts rather than words. Fear, desperation, hope. Their homeworld's oceans had been destroyed by their own technological advancement, and now they sought the artifact's power to restore what they'd lost. A sudden impact rattled her submersible. The new arrivals weren't interested in communication. They wanted the artifact's location. Sarah's brief moment of understanding was shattered as the armada began a systematic search pattern, their biomechanical forms releasing clouds of microscopic probes into the water. But the ocean responded. Schools of fish scattered the probes with electromagnetic pulses generated by their bodies. Colonies of deep-sea bacteria multiplied rapidly, creating clouds of bioluminescence that confused the alien sensors. Even the currents themselves seemed to shift, guided by the collective movement of countless marine organisms. The first hunter, whom Sarah had begun to think of as the ambassador, transmitted again. The patterns were urgent now, warning. The armada wouldn't stop. They couldn't stop. Their civilization had less than one planetary cycle left before total collapse. Sarah's mind raced. The artifact wasn't just a key to power. It was a repository of biological knowledge, a record of how to build sustainable relationships between technology and nature. The very thing the tube worms had demonstrated with their perfect circular colony. "Look around you," Sarah transmitted, pouring all her knowledge of Earth's oceans into the signal. "Our world's oceans never needed restoration because we learned to work with them, not control them." She activated her submersible's external cameras, broadcasting images of the marine ecosystem in action. Hydrothermal vents sustaining vast communities of life. Symbiotic relationships between species that had evolved over millions of years. The delicate balance of predator and prey that maintained the ocean's health. The ambassador's biomechanical form shifted, its patterns becoming more complex as it processed this information. Then it did something unexpected. It began to change. Its rigid technological components softened, becoming more organic, more adapted to natural ocean currents rather than fighting against them. But the armada was closing in. They didn't understand what the ambassador now saw, couldn't comprehend that the power they sought wasn't in controlling the ocean, but in becoming part of it. Sarah watched in horror as they began to attack their own transformed companion, viewing its adaptation as a betrayal. That's when Sarah made a decision that would either save two civilizations or doom them both. She accessed her submersible's navigation system, plotting a course toward the artifact. But instead of trying to protect it, she would show the adaptary exactly what they had forgotten. "Follow me," she transmitted to the ambassador. "Help me show them." The transformed adaptary fell into formation beside her submersible as they dove deeper, pursued by the armada. The pressure at this depth was immense, but Sarah had one advantage they didn't. She knew that survival in Earth's oceans had never been about domination. It had always been about adaptation, cooperation, and respect for forces far greater than any single species. As they descended, the ocean itself seemed to come alive around them. Bioluminescent creatures created patterns that mimicked the artifact's ancient geometries. Swarms of deep-sea life moved in harmony, demonstrating the very principles the adaptary had lost. Even the water pressure itself became a teacher, showing how life on Earth had learned to thrive by accepting and adapting to conditions that seemed impossible to survive. The ambassador's patterns shifted again, this time broadcasting directly to its people in a language of light and motion that transcended mere communication. It was showing them a truth their technology had blinded them to, that the power to save their civilization had never been locked in an artifact. It had been in the wisdom of natural systems all along. Some of the pursuing adaptari began to slow, their forms shifting as understanding dawned. Others pressed their attack, unable or unwilling to abandon their desperate mission. Sarah knew they were approaching a turning point, not just for the adaptari, but for humanity's first contact with an alien civilization. As they neared the artifact's resting place, Sarah prepared herself for what would come next. She had one chance to show them the true meaning of adaptation, and it would either bridge the gap between their worlds or trigger a conflict that could destroy them all. The artifact pulsed with renewed energy as Sarah's submersible approached, its ancient patterns synchronizing with the bioluminescent signals of marine life around them. The tube worms that had guarded it for millennia extended their crimson plumes, creating a living barrier between the artifact and the approaching adaptari armada. "This is what you've forgotten," Sarah broadcast, channeling her signal through the ambassador's now transformed body. "Life adapts. Life cooperates. Life finds a way." The artifact responded to her presence, its glow intensifying. Sarah realized it wasn't just a repository of knowledge, it was a test. The tube worms hadn't been guarding it. They had been demonstrating how to use it. Their perfect circular colony was a living example of the harmony the adaptari had lost. Above them, the armada split into factions. Some, influenced by the ambassador's transformation, began to alter their biomechanical forms, surrendering to the ocean's natural rhythms. Others, driven by fear and desperation, prepared to attack, their bodies becoming more weapon than vessel. Sarah made a choice. She opened her submersible's hatch. The ambassador's patterns flashed in alarm, but Sarah had already done the calculations. At this depth, She had exactly 45 seconds before the pressure would become fatal. She activated her suit's emergency systems and pushed off from the submersible. The freezing water hit her like a physical blow, but Sarah forced herself to stay focused. She swam toward the artifact, her movements deliberately slow and unthreatening. The tube worms parted before her, recognizing her intent in a way that transcended species. "Watch," she transmitted, her suit's systems broadcasting to both factions of the adaptary. "This is how Earth's life survives the impossible." Sarah reached out and touched the artifact. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Knowledge flooded through her, not just data, but understanding. The artifact was a bridge designed to teach species how to evolve beyond their limitations by learning from the most successful laboratory of survival in the universe, nature itself. Through her connection, the adaptary saw Earth's oceans as she did. They witnessed the countless ways life had adapted to every challenge. They saw how competition had given way to cooperation, how individual survival had become inseparable from the health of the whole ecosystem. But most importantly, they saw their own reflection. Their civilization hadn't failed because they lacked power. It had failed because they had tried to conquer natural forces instead of learning from them. The attacking faction faltered as this understanding reached them. Their weapons dissolved, reformed into more organic shapes. The transformation that had begun with the ambassador spread through their ranks like a wave of enlightenment. Sarah's suit beeped a warning. 20 seconds of survival time remained. The pressure was becoming unbearable, but she maintained her connection, showing the adaptary one final truth. Sometimes survival meant being willing to risk everything to protect something greater than yourself. The ambassador moved forward, its transformed body now a perfect blend of technology and nature. It extended a tendril towards Sarah, offering rescue. But first, it shared a vision of its home world, not as it was, dying and sterile, but as it could be if they applied what they had learned here. With her last reserves of strength, Sarah reached for the ambassador's tendril. The moment they connected, something extraordinary happened. The artifact's energy flowed through both of them, and then out into the surrounding ocean. Every creature in the abyss lit up in response, creating a network of living light that stretched as far as the eye could see. The tube worms began to sing, their vibrations carrying through the water in patterns that matched the artifact's ancient geometries. The adaptary armada, now fully transformed, added their own harmonies to the song. It was a symphony of survival, a celebration of life's endless capacity to adapt and thrive. As the ambassador pulled her to safety, Sarah understood that this wasn't just first contact between humans and aliens. It was a reminder that the greatest technological achievement wasn't conquering nature. It was learning to become part of it. Inside her submersible once more, Sarah watched as the adaptary began to gather around the artifact, not to claim it, but to learn from it. They had come seeking power and found wisdom instead. Their biomechanical bodies now flowed with the ocean currents rather than against them, each movement a testament to their newfound understanding. The ambassador's patterns shifted one last time, forming words that Sarah's instruments translated with perfect clarity. "We came searching for salvation in the depths of your world, but found it in the depth of your understanding. Our oceans can live again, not through domination, but through harmony." Dawn broke over the Pacific as Sarah's submersible breached the surface, but she wasn't alone. The ocean around the research vessel churned with transformed adaptary, their bodies now seamlessly blending biological and technological elements in ways that honored rather than dominated nature. The morning light played across their surfaces, creating rainbow patterns that mirrored the complexity of Earth's marine ecosystems. Dr. Martinez and the surface team stared in wonder from the ship's deck. After hours of silence, they had feared the worst. Instead, they witnessed humanity's first peaceful contact with an alien civilization. "I understand now," Sarah said, her voice carrying across the calm waters to both humans and adaptary. The artifact wasn't a weapon or a tool. It was a message, left by someone who knew that sooner or later, Every technological civilization faces the same choice: adapt or perish. The ambassador rose partially from the water, its form shifting to create a platform of living tissue beside the ship. As Sarah stepped onto it, she felt the same connection she had experienced in the depths, not control but communication. The Adaptari had learned to listen to the ocean, and the ocean had welcomed them as its newest children. "Your world has much to teach us," the ambassador transmitted, its patterns now visible in the sunlight. "We came seeking power over nature, but you showed us something far more valuable: how to become part of it." Research vessels from around the world were already converging on their position, drawn by reports of unprecedented marine activity. Sarah knew that everything would change now. Humanity had gained not just first contact, but a profound lesson about their place in the cosmos. The Adaptari shared their story with Earth's scientists, how their civilization had once been like humanity's, proud of their technological achievements, blind to the damage they were causing. They had turned their oceans into machines, seeing nature as something to be conquered rather than understood. By the time they realized their mistake, their world's ecosystems had nearly collapsed. But now they had a second chance. The transformed Adaptari demonstrated their new capabilities, showing how technology and nature could work in harmony. They could clean polluted waters, restore damaged coral reefs, and communicate with marine life in ways that human scientists had only dreamed of. "We offer an exchange," the ambassador proposed. "Help us restore our world with the wisdom we've learned from yours. In return, we'll help you protect your oceans before they face the same crisis that nearly destroyed us." Sarah watched as marine biologists, oceanographers, and environmental scientists from around the globe began collaborating with the Adaptari. The aliens' biomechanical expertise, combined with humanity's understanding of Earth's oceans, promised solutions to problems that had once seemed insurmountable. Deep beneath the waves, the artifact continued its ancient vigil, but its purpose had been fulfilled. It had brought together two civilizations at crucial moments in their development, teaching them that true progress meant growing in harmony with the natural world, not apart from it. The two worms still maintained their perfect circular colony around the artifact, but now they were joined by transformed Adaptari who had chosen to remain in Earth's oceans as guardians and students. They would ensure that the artifact's wisdom would never again be forgotten or misunderstood. 6 months later, Sarah stood on a beach at sunset, watching Adaptari and human scientists work together to restore a damaged kelp forest. The aliens' transformed bodies moved through the waves with fluid grace, their technology now serving life rather than trying to control it. A group of whales surfaced nearby, their songs interweaving with the Adaptari's bioluminescent patterns in a communication more complex and beautiful than either species could achieve alone. Earth's oceans were coming alive in new ways, as two civilizations learned to see the sea not as a resource to be exploited, but as a teacher whose lessons had spanned galaxies. "We thought we came to save ourselves," the ambassador said, its form shimmering beside her in the dying light. "Instead, we found salvation in learning to see through your eyes. Your people understand something that we have forgotten, that the greatest power isn't in domination, but in adaptation." Sarah smiled, watching as a school of fish swam through an Adaptari's transformed body without fear. Maybe that's why the artifact chose Earth's oceans as its resting place. Our seas have always taught the same lesson to anyone willing to learn. Life finds a way, not by fighting nature, but by becoming part of its endless dance. The sun sank below the horizon, but the ocean continued to glow with the light of two civilizations working as one. Above them, the stars began to emerge, and Sarah wondered how many other worlds might be out there, facing the same choice that humanity and the Adaptari had faced. She hoped they would learn, as her new allies had, that the price of survival wasn't paid in power or control, but in the wisdom to know when to let go of both. The ocean whispered its ancient secrets to aliens and humans alike, and together they listened, learned, and evolved. In the end, the greatest discovery hadn't been the artifact, or even the Adaptari themselves. It had been the recognition that true intelligence meant understanding one's place in the great web of life that connected all things, from the smallest deep-sea microbe to the most advanced spacefaring civilization.